One thing I try not to do is to get too close to my reference photo too soon. I like to have it a little ways across the room so that I don't just zero in on all those details and feel like I need to just go straight into that, because it's just not going to serve my painting well at an early stage if I start pushing into detail and lose sight of the overall shapes. It's the ability to edit that really helps my painting to work. So right now what I'm going to be doing is trying to create form in the scene. That's kind of the next stage after establishing the major shapes, is really starting to bring out some of the dimensions in the painting, in the landscape, to not to get all the details down, but to just give us some depth, contrast that creates form. So I'm going to be building up the depths in the rocks right now and trying to get those shapes put together. Going back and forth to my reference photo and also just paying attention to the painting itself and seeing, trying to make that work right here on the page. I don't have to be completely tied to my reference photo to get a successful outcome. A lot of, the longer I paint, the more I need to focus instead on the painting itself and make sure that I can make that work, because my painting is not going to be exactly like the reference photo. So, and nobody's going to, when I hang it in a gallery or sell it, it's not going to hang beside the reference photo. No one's going to be comparing. I just have to focus on, is the painting working as a whole? Not, does it look just like the reference photo? That's not my goal here. There are more depths in the waterfall than I originally placed as well, so I want to be aware of that and accommodate that. But I want to simplify too. Just because I see a lot of details and soft transitions doesn't mean I have to paint them all in. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there. And that's where artistic license comes in. Being an artist, choosing the scene for yourself. A little bit of dry brush here and edges just brought that rock right out into life. Look at how much shape I have there just from those little few strokes. Cool. These rocks are nearer to these rocks, so they're going to have more detail. They're also going to have larger shapes. And I try to simplify shapes away from the focal point as well. We don't want to get too detailed and then distract from where we actually want people to be looking. We don't want them to spend a ton of time staring at these rocks. We want them to go right into the waterfalls. I want some different, some contrast between this near cliff and the one that's a little further away. So we're going to put some dark values there that pops that cliff forward. Now this side I think needs some strong darks, so let's try placing those. And I'm using dry brush at this point. I'm trying not to be timid about it, because sometimes I have a tendency to want to soften every mark that I place. I know that about myself. I don't want uncertainty to cause me to hold back in my paintings. Something really beautiful about courage. Okay, I want to paint these top of the water here. There's a really beautiful turquoise color. I think I need a smaller brush. I'm going to mix my cobalt teal with a little bit of verditer blue. The verditer blue is the same blue I used in the mountains. So it's not a foreign color. And the water is flat on top where it's in the river or the lake. It's a river. And then where there's actually some rocks there that we'll need to paint as well. And there are some white water areas in here as well. Now when you're painting with a smaller brush, it's really easy to get very controlled. We don't want to be too fussy. And then there's some areas where the water and the rocks kind of appear. I think there's rounded areas where there are rocks. And the eye is going to really move toward those contrasts. That's a good thing. We want people to look at the top of the waterfall, don't we? And then there's a couple little pokey-outy rocks right here, right there. And then the landscape itself at the base of the trees. Here, there's a dark line that shows the shore. And that brings the eye right into that part of the painting. There's strong contrasts there. It's really beautiful. I see a little bit of darker value blues in here. Layers of depths in my waterfall. And some of that might read as crisp line as well. I'm not going to rush into softening it here. Not until I see if it works as a bit of a crisp line. Maybe a little bit of softening, but we'll keep some of those lines as well. I'm going to add some more depths in my trees, but I don't want to paint them in a fussy way. I want them to be very simple. A little bit of that same dark green that was in the back trees. We'll just put it along the base here. Pull up slightly. I think that works. This side I've taken a little bit of a few liberties because I didn't want to, I don't know, I just didn't really like the dead trees on that side. So we're going to use the green gold. I've just added a little bit of teal to it to just kind of cool it off a little bit. For some reason I felt like it needed a slightly different green than is on this side. Dabbing in a little bit of green wet and wet can help us get those depths that we want without having to go to excess. At this stage, because we're building up form, we just move back and forth between all the different areas of the painting. Moving back and forth like that means that we don't have to stop and wait for areas to dry. You know, there's always an area that's dry enough to work on. Right now I think that's going to be this cliff here. It just feels a little flat. So let's see if we can't do something about that. Mixed a little bit of the sodalite with the verditer blue, using the small brush to make fine horizontal lines and then smudge them with my side of my brush. And there's actually quite a strong dark along this area. So let's see if we can't paint that in. That crisp line, and then we just smudge it out a little bit. Drag it out, get those textures. Sometimes it's really just small changes that make a big difference in a painting. Don't rush to make big changes. If you're feeling like your painting's not working well, pause and just look for those small areas where you might need to increase contrast. Sometimes it's just a few little marks to make that contrast stronger. I'm darkening this edge to see if that won't help my waterfall pop forward a bit more and give that stronger form to the painting. A good part of this stage of the painting is an exercise in seeing values. Where are the lights and the darks? And I find that it really helps to squint at my reference photo as a way of seeing the contrasts, rather than paying attention to the detail, which is what we do when we look at it. Without squinting, we tend to get caught up in details. We look for by squinting, we simplify. Everything gets fuzzy, and we're much better able to see the contrast between light and dark. I struggle in waterfalls. I'm just gonna confess it now. I struggle with keeping my colors from getting muddy. That's one reason I'm working with mainly cool colors here: blues, lavender, turquoise. That's gonna help me keep those colors a little cleaner. I got to keep my hand out of the paint as well. If there are browns, if you're seeing peach or pink or brown in the waterfall, save it for the end. Put it in, don't put it in at the same time as you're putting in the cool colors. It'll be easier to keep it from getting muddy. Okay, this area down at the very bottom, I'm almost ready to stop, I think. I'm almost at the level of detail that is pleasing to me. This area down below here seems to be primarily cast in shadow, so it's cooler. We don't see the same bright whites that we see up here. Okay, I'm going to paint my sky. I think I'm using my cobalt teal, a little dab of Cenarius blue just to change it slightly. Light touch where I have to brush up against the areas that I've already painted. Usually a sky gets done first in a landscape. So I'm going to keep it really simple. That's probably about all I need to do. Slightly darker in a few places. I'm going to do a few trees on this side, I think. Just some negative painting, I think, to bring some trees forward and send some back. That should work. It's not really what my reference photo is saying, but my painting is saying we need a way to separate these trees, and this is the easiest way to do that at this stage of the painting. Few little detail marks that, I don't know, they just feel like they belong. That'll help balance out a lot of the soft areas that are in the painting, I think. Okay, so were I to want to make changes at this stage, what would I need to do? I think, what does the painting need in those final tweaks? Maybe a little bit more contrast right at the top of the waterfall. you know, maybe a dab here or there of contrasting turquoise. Really trying to see even a little bit more than the photo's telling me. The photos tend to flatten contrasts and highlights a bit. They blow out highlights so you can't see all the subtleties, and they flatten shadows so you can't see the subtleties there either. I'm adding that little bit of warm color that I can see over on this side, hoping it will work. A little bit of kind of a shadowy blue shade as well. Warm and cool. Let's try it. That is probably as dark as I dare go with my waterfall. Put a little bit of line in there to add some shape to my rocks. Okay, I'm going to call this done. Nothing compares to being there, but when you can't get to a place or you want to treasure that memory, it's pretty special to be able to paint it, relive it all over again. I'm coming back to this painting after a couple of days away, and it's really good to come back and revisit a painting, not just to close the book and say, well, it's done, because sometimes fresh eyes can help you evaluate and find ways to improve. Now, actually, when I finished this up, I didn't feel as happy with it as I wanted to feel. And it was actually really beneficial for me to come after a few days of not even looking at it at all, because I was able to appreciate so much more the painting for its merits. And a few things that I'm really liking. The water movement, I think I've added the right amount of values in there to really catch the feeling of the movement of the water. One thing I didn't mention, and I should probably bring it up now, is that there's a part of the water where I made a mistake. And when I was working on the upper part of the water, my hand needed to rest somewhere, and it brushed against the paint that was here. And there's a couple little spots where my hand transferred paint from here over to this part of the painting. But I did not erase those as I saw them happening. I just didn't mention them while I was recording the lesson. They're actually doing good things. They actually help give that feeling of rocks through the mist, add some edges and texture to the painting that wouldn't be there otherwise. So I'm glad I didn't just panic and try to blot and scrub, which would have given my painting, the paper, a little bit of a rubbed look, which isn't generally a great look. Paper behaves so much better when we haven't been disturbing the fibers by pushing them back and forth with worrisome brush marks. The other thing I was thinking is, as I look at this painting and I want to maybe develop it just a little bit more, is I wonder about making this rock formation darker to create still more contrast in the scene. So I'm going to give that a try. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I believe I was using the burnt bronzite genuine, so I need to find that. And we're going to use that in the painting here to darken that area of the painting and just see if that strong warm pattern doesn't add something that was maybe missing in impact. And it's just that quick to put that in place. Apparently I squeezed out more paint than I even need. I'm going to put a little bit of that stronger saturation, tweak the shape a bit. It's a beautiful color. It's got a nice shimmer to it. That's so gorgeous. And then we'll go in with some of the original color, other colors that we used. A little bit of the lavender, which has some opacity to it. So it sits really nicely on top of that burnt bronzite. Be careful with spatter that it doesn't fly everywhere. If you're a fly everywhere spatter kind of person, you might want to consider masking off part of your painting. Here I have a little bit of spatter that traveled up into the waterfall. I'm just going to fuzz it out a bit. There's also a tiny bit of the green gold color that I was using. that kind of faded away. Let's put a little bit more of that back into the painting. Give that mossy rock feel to this near foreground object. And we could go back to the Sodalite Genuine and just drop in a little bit of those darkest darks. Thinking of rocky crevices, painting some lines. And then if you have any lines that you're feeling are too dominant, you know, a soft brush can just blur them a little bit. Damp brush. And then maybe back to the burnt bronzite one last time. Now this is an experiment. It might turn out that I'm wrong and that it was better to leave this near rock face lighter in value. The only way I'm going to know that is if I try it out. I'm just going to hint a little bit of that burnt bronzite over on this side of the painting. It's going to pull that warm brown just a little bit into the painting. Just a little bit more. Just tweaking. Those little lines that are warm in a painting that's predominantly cool in many places, they're almost like they're cues that you don't notice. They're very subtle. Nobody's saying, oh, look at the way she pulled that reddish orange across the painting. Nobody except those of us who have trained ourselves to do these things. And when we know about those little tricks, that having this warm color here and then echoing it in other parts of the painting and the impact that has to guide your eye through the scene, you know, we can use that and be really intentional about it as you gain that experience to be able to anticipate that. I've gone darker and bolder away from the waterfall. What did that contribute to the painting? How did it distract from this path of water? And should I do it again in the future? Those are things I have to decide. Some of that happens right now as I evaluate the painting, and some of it will happen in the days and weeks to come as I continue to look at this painting and think about what I like and where my eyes go and how I experience the scene.